Good day, learners. I am Olubumi Kazim, and I'm here to present to you the study session 1 of EDM213, which is the course has to do with demographic analysis and the educational system. So today we'll be going through the study session 1, and I would share my screen with you so that you would follow me in the course of this session. All right, I believe you can see my screen. I will take you through this session using the screen. So let me put it in slideshow. I'm waiting for it to load so that we can all see it clearly. All right, like I said, the course is EDM213, Demographic Analysis and the Educational System. And in this study session, we shall be going through the meaning, nature, and scope of demography. I am your facilitator. All right, if you look at this picture, this is a picture of people. You have male, female, you have the young, you have old. That is to tell you the importance of people. All right. So, but in this study session 1, like I said, we shall be going through the meaning, the nature, and scope of demography. Now, that if you observe a gathering of people, whether in a market, in a school, or in offices, you would see people of different sexes, of different ages, of different economic background, different heights, with a whole lot of differences in them. Now, this observation actually relates to demography. When we talk about demography, our concern is about the people and their numbers, the population, whether it is growing or whether it is static. Now, what we're talking about is that we're talking about demography. Our concern might be about the structure of the population as well as its activities. When we talk about structure, you're talking about whether the composition of that population. Do you have males? Do you have females? So in terms of sexes, structure, again, it might be in terms of age. Are they young? Are they old? However, we're talking about in terms of the activities they're engaged in. They might talk about what occupation do they have? What kind of education do they have? What kind of personality do they have? What kind of environment do they live in? So for us as educational managers in training, for you, my learner, you are an educational manager in training. That's the way I refer to my students. And I feel that you must understand the importance of this course in your educational training. Demographic analysis is very, very important because when we talk about education, it is about the people. So for us as policymakers, as educational practitioners, teachers, parents, whatever stakeholder that we might, whatever our position as far as educational stakeholders are concerned, must be interested in the population of people and how to educate the citizens. So for that purpose, in educating the population, must be interested in the size of the population, the dynamics of that population, how it is increasing, how it is decreasing, and the quality of that population. So almost all estimations concerning population in terms of the quantitative or the qualitative aspects of education relates to population. So for that reason, this course is very, very important to us. And this particular study session is an introduction into this course. So at the end of this session, you should be able to explain the meaning of demography, should be able to tell us the nature of demography as a science, should be able to describe the scope of demography and distinguish between micro and macro demography. All right, the key terms in this session are demography itself, population studies, science, microdemography, and macrodemography. So these are key terms that on your own at the end of this study session, should be able to understand the key terms, explain them, define them, and apply them appropriately. All right, talking about demography, the meaning of demography, we're saying that there are two key terms that we must pay attention to. The first is demography, the second is population studies. Although population studies seems to be more popular, demography is more often used in discussions or in studies. So when we talk about demography, it actually comes from two Latin words, demo and graphy. Demo refers to people, and graphy refers to the study of, the measurement of, or the description of, or the science of. So etymologically, when you bring the two together, demography would mean the science, the measurement, or the study of the people. So demography studies human population in terms of the size, composition, and dynamics. Like I said earlier, we're talking about the size, talking about the quantitative measurement of a population. What's the number? How big is it, or how small is it? In terms of composition, we are interested in the structure of the population in terms of the sex, the gender, in terms of the educational qualification, in terms of the age of the population. And we're talking about dynamics. You're talking about the changes that take place in the population, which affects or which influences the size of the population or the composition. So by dynamics, you're looking at the birth, you're talking about death, you're talking about migration. So those are key things that we refer to when we talk about the dynamics of the population. So population dynamics, so that is what we refer to. So when we talk about population, generally, population has to do with a collection of people coexisting at a particular time in a particular place. So the place, the geographical entity could be a small community, it could be a large community, it could be a state, it could be a country, it could be a continent, it could even be the whole world. So the population now has to do with the number of people existing or living together at that particular time and sharing common features like residence in a geographical region. So the number of people living in an area at a particular time is what we refer to as population. By the time you break down population, you would have the sex, you will have the age, the state of health, the economic status, the marital status, the residential area, and so on, which are what we call the population structure of the population. All right. So still talking about demography, that different definitions of demography, so many definitions of demography. In fact, there are as much definitions of demography as we have demographers. So each demographer refers to or defines demography according to his or her own understanding. So on that basis, we'll just take a look at some of them. We have the first one that we have in this slide. That demography is the study of the size, regional spread, and the structure of the population, the changes in that population, and the elements of such changes, including natality, mortality, regional movement, and social mobility. This I have explained earlier. I think the only new term there is social mobility. I've already explained the structure of the population. I've talked about regional spread in terms of the communities where these people reside. So some areas might be densely populated, some areas are sparsely populated. Then in terms of the changes that take place within the population, I've talked about this is what we refer to as the dynamics. So it could be increasing based on birth. It could be decreasing based on death, which is what we call mortality, birth, natality, regional movement, that is migration in and out of a particular geographical area. Then social mobility in terms of the improvement in status, the change of status. Some people might move from being poor to being rich. Some might move from being illiterate to being literate, and so on like that, which changes the way people perceive them or the way people look at them. So that is what we mean by social mobility. According to Lundquist, Anderton, and Yauke, they consider demography as a science of population that studies, one, the size and structure of the population. I have already explained that. The unique life course processes that alter this structure. Some of those changes that happen to them, which we have talked about, we refer to it as dynamics, as well as the relationships between population structure and change, and the broader social and physical environment in which they exist. So this is the definition of demography according to those authors. Then according to Poussin and Bouvier, 2017, the concern of demography comprises that for them, here the emphasis is not on the meaning of demography. However, the concern of demography, what exactly is demography all about? What is it that demography studies? So here we're made to understand that demography is concerned with the size of the population, the components of the population, that is what we call the population structure or composition, then population growth or decline. That population we're talking about, is it increasing in size or is it actually reducing in size? The population structure, the distribution of the population, as well as the characteristics of the population, that all these are the characteristics of are the concerns of demography. All right. So now we'll talk about the next one. Here we are looking at the nature of demography as a science. Before we talk about the nature of demography as a science, we must first understand what are those things that characterizes science. When we say a particular field of endeavor or field of study is a science, the characteristics that we must see in such a field includes the fact that it should be a systematized body of knowledge. It should have its own laws or principles. Then the theories emanating from that particular field can be verified by observation and experimentation. That is, if you postulate that this is this, just like for instance, in economics, we talk about the law of demand and supply. If you postulate that law, then we should be able to verify the authenticity of such a claim either through observation or through experimentation. So if it passes that, then it's one of those things that will qualify that particular field to be a science. Then it made valid forecasts. Here, what we're saying is that scientific fields or specializations that we have that we consider to be a science, they made projections, they forecast. This is quite different from prophecy. In making forecasts, it means there must have been a trend that has been established. So establishing that trend can allow us to postulate or forecast for the future, project into the future that if it goes on like this, for instance, if you say that the rate at which we are giving birth in Nigeria, if the rate that we have studied, the population growth rate is, let's say, around 3%, that means that if it continues in that rate, then by so number of years, probably in the next 10 years, this is what will happen to the population. So in demography, so that is scientific field, make valid forecasts. Then the theories or principles can be self-corrective. That is, if a principle is made, if in the process of also validating it, or some things changes over time because of probably advancement, then there could be adjustment to some of those principles or postulations that have been made in the past, or the theories. Then the theories being postulated in that field must have universal validity. What this is saying is that it should not just be a theory or principle that would hold in a particular region or area, and by the time it gets to another region, such a postulation will not hold. For instance, should not say that a particular, a field of endeavor, human endeavor, a field of study comes up with a theory. For that field to be regarded as a science, the theories that emanate from that field should have universal acceptance or application. If it holds in Nigeria, it should hold in the United States of America, it should hold in Saudi Arabia, it should hold in Argentina. So far, the conditions upon which such a theory is made, so far those conditions are the same, then the theory should the postulations of that theory should remain the same regardless of the area. So if these are the characteristics of any field of study for it to qualify as a science, then let us now see if demography itself qualifies to be called a science. So on that basis, these are some of the elements that we see in demography for us to conclude that truly demography itself is a science. One of such is the fact that demography uses a scientific method. The same way by which science arrives at its own theories, laws, or principles is the same thing that demography uses. Demography collects facts, it collects data from the field, it studies it, analyzes it, and on the basis of that comes up with a result that, and when such results are tested at different times and different situations, and the results remain the same, upon that, theories are made. So as a result of that, we can say that demography uses the same method adopted by science in arriving at its facts or theories. Then another thing is demography is a factual study concerning population with census as the principal methods of study. Demography works on the basis of facts, not on conjectures, not on hearsay, and not just on personal opinions, but actually facts that are collected from the field. Then again, demographic principles are globalized. The principles of demography, holds sway in different situations in all parts of the world. It's not a case whether that because this is Nigeria, we are blacks, so for that reason, then in the United States it will not hold, or not. We won't say that, oh, because it is the United States and the demographic principles that are applied there do not hold or cannot hold in Nigeria or in Kenya or in Ghana. If it is a demographic principle, then it must have global application and acceptance. Then demographic principles are verifiable. So that is another quality of it that makes it a science. Because when we talk about demographic principles, there is something that must that should have the possibility of being authenticated. So it's not just on what is said. They must be able to test it to find out its veracity, whether it is true or it is false. Demography establishes cause and effect relations in situations. What this is saying is that demography tries to see connections between a cause and the effect of such an event. For instance, if we say that if our birth rate increases unchecked, continues unchecked, they automatically might get to a particular situation where this government might not have the capacity to be able to adequately cater for the population. So on that basis, you should be able to draw a link between a cause and an effect. Then again, demographic processes make valid predictions. Certainly, on the basis of that, because demography deals with population, for instance, we are able to say that if the population of a particular country has been growing at a particular rate, then on that basis, we can predict what will happen, what the size of the population will be by a particular year, if the trend remains the same. So on that basis, because demography makes valid predictions, it qualifies to be a science. Now, apart from these characteristics that we have stated, according to Yi, it is also stated that demography as a scientific discipline also has some qualities that makes us conclude that it is actually a science. Number one is that demography is largely quantitative and relatively precise. That is, we make a whole lot of calculations and mathematical and statistical analysis in demography. And on that basis, the results that we get are relatively precise. That is, they are relatively accurate as results. So it's not just on the basis of conjecture or what someone feels. It's not personal opinions or beliefs. It's actually quantitative. On the basis of that, we are able to establish a fact from it. It is also interdisciplinary. There are different disciplines that come together to form demography. You find some of those in archaeology, you have it in anthropology, you have economics, you have sociology, you have criminology, you also have biology coming together, even geography as part of things that come together in demography. Then apart from that, Demographic influences can be felt in every aspect of human life, including political, economic, cultural, and religious life. So on that basis, Tauber is able to note that with improved data, new techniques, and precise measurement of demographic transition that is occurring, demography has become science rather than literature. So on the basis of all this, we're able to conclude the fact that demography is truly a science. And in terms of science, it is said that it is both an abstract science and an applied technology. What we are saying is that, yes, some theories might sound abstract, but then by the time you apply it and you look at the situation of things, you would see that demography has actually grown over the years as a scientific field. And on that basis, the most demography utilizes the scientific method, especially the analytical method, in arriving at its theories. So in terms of scope, which is one of the things that we also want to look at in this session, demography can be classified into two. We have microdemography and macrodemography. Microdemography, when we say micro, from it's a scientific term, we say micro is something on a small scale, and macro is something on a large scale. So just like in economics, you have microeconomics and you have macroeconomics. So in demography, you also have microdemography and also have macrodemography. In microdemography, it studies smaller units and is conducted intensively. That is, yes, the scope is small, but it is very, very intense. You go deep, you go into details. So on that basis, it studies individuals and the family as a unit of the society. So it's not studying the big countries or continents, rather it studies communities, states, economy, and other local areas. So in this case, the basis of analysis, the point of analysis, actually the individual as a person and families that make up communities. So on that basis, it looks as the numerical composition of such families and the quality of each unit of that particular family within the community. So on that basis, microdemography is very, very intense and is very, very detailed, although on a small scale. In contrast, however, macrodemography entails large-scale studies of systems, societies, and cultures. On that basis, it looks as issues such as increase or decline in mortality rates, natality rate, population growth, the sex ratio, the health conditions of people. So on that, it looks at the economic situation of a particular country. What is the cause of that? How can the economy be expanded on the basis of the population and the quality of members of that population? It also looks at social issues like family composition, religion, and education, as well as the challenges of migration, urbanization, etc., which are the concerns of macrodemography. So what that, for instance, is saying is that looking at a particular country and the quality of the population, if the government wants to have a change in it, then it has to improve the quality of the population. And when the quality, for instance, is improved, then that, for instance, would reduce the rate of migration. A lot of people, for instance, are running away from the developing countries into the developed countries because of the economic situations in such countries. So for that reason, that's a concern for demography. And the aspect of demography, for instance, that we look at such is macrodemography, because in this case, you're talking about larger countries, you're talking about continents, people moving from one subcontinent or a continent into another continent in search of greener pastures. That is a major concern of macrodemography. But one thing is the two subfields depend on one another and they relate very well with one another. So either microdemography or macrodemography, both of them study the population, and they also look at the issues of birth, fertility, and migration within a local community or within the larger society, and how such affects the quality of life of the people. Then the field of demography has been expanding over the years since population conferences held since 1954. We've been having what we call the World Population Conference. And since 1954, some of the issues that have become part and parcel of the studies of demography has included issues of death rate, fertility, gender composition, migration, future probabilities in terms of population, and the ways by which the population can be measured, and the techniques as well as population measurement techniques, as well as means by which we can train demographers, increase the number of demographers in the world, and how the issues of population and means of subsistence should be a concern of governments of different countries. Apart from all this, other things that we look at in demography include the qualitative aspect of demographic data, population distribution, family planning, population growth, demographic aspects of housing, savings and investment, the economy, unemployment, and other issues like that. All right. So some authors have broadly classified the scope of demography into four categories, namely descriptive demography, which deals with issues around registration, statistics, and census. So how do we register people? How do we know the exact number of people? That is that. The analytical demography, which is concerns the analysis of collected data, the data that we have collected either through census or through sample survey or different means by which birth registration and death registration and the likes. So how do we analyze such data that we have collected, and what kind of results can we bring out of it in terms of the rates, ratios of changes within the population? Then we'll talk about comparative demography. This one entails the study of various aspects of population and their determinants at two different places and two different points in time. For instance, you can compare the population of Nigeria with that of the United States. You can compare with, that is probably a developing country with a developed country. You can also compare two developing countries, for instance, comparing Nigeria and Ghana, or you can compare two developed economies, like let's say United States and the United Kingdom. You compare the population and different aspects of the population. Then we also have the historical demography, which relates to time series and study of population rates and ratios as they change over time. Here, for instance, if you might look at China, for instance. Over time, because China is the most populated country in the world, over time, the population has been declining because they are trying to control that population. And if you study that, you would see that the rate at which the population growth rate in China is very, very low. Compared to another country, India, that the population has been increasing geometrically, such that it is projected that in the next, say, 10, 20 years, India would overtake China as the most populated country in the world. So that aspect of demography is what is called historical demography. So in summary, in this study session, you have learned that demography is derived from two Latin words, demo and graphy. Demo meaning people, and graphy meaning the study or the measurement or the description. So by the time you combine the two together, you have demography as the scientific or the study or the measurement of the people, the population. Now, demography studies human population in relation to its size, composition, and dynamics. You also learned that demography is applied in different aspects of human endeavor and assists in understanding characteristics, strengths, and implications of changes in human population. So you're able to know that if population changes, what would happen to it? If it increases, what would happen to it? If it decreases, what would happen to it? They will also mention the fact that demography is a science because it possesses the characteristics of a typical scientific discipline. Then the scope of demography is broadly divided into microdemography and macrodemography. So on your own, you can assess yourself and your understanding of this session by attempting the following questions. 1.1 of it, what is the meaning of demography? Should be able to define that, tell us the meaning of demography. Then should be able to tell us and discuss the nature of demography as a science. Then how would you describe the scope of demography? Then what is the difference between microdemography and macrodemography? So for further studies, you can go to the sites that have been displayed for you to get additional information on some of the things that we have discussed in this study session. Then again, in case you have further questions or you require additional explanations or some issues that you're having as a student as a learner in this institute, then you can send a mail to iag@dli.unilag.edu.ng, or you can call the number on your screen, 080-333-66677. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.